Nike just handed a 21-year-old from the Philippines a $45 million deal, built her an entire gallery inside their headquarters, and designed her custom shoes. Meanwhile, their world number one, a multi-Grand Slam champion, asked for a custom outfit and got told no. The same brand, very different treatment, and Sabalenka is reportedly not okay with any of it. Do you think Nike made the right call choosing Eala over Sabalenka as the face of their women's tennis push? Drop your honest take in the comments. This one is genuinely worth debating. Let's talk about what Nike just did, because it is either the smartest move in sports marketing this decade or the most brutal snub in recent tennis history, possibly both at the same time. Nike officially announced Alex Eala as their new brand ambassador in women's tennis. Not Aryna Sabalenka, the world number one. Not Iga Swiatek, a 21-year-old from the Philippines who is currently ranked 31st in the world. And they didn't just sign her quietly and move on. They threw a full event at their headquarters to celebrate. They opened an Alex Eala gallery, an actual dedicated gallery inside the Nike building, with her most iconic tennis moments framed on the walls like she already belongs in a museum. They designed her custom shoes from scratch, and they handed her a reported $45 million over 3 years with performance incentives on top. For a player ranked 31st in the world, the tennis world is still processing this. To understand why Nike made this move, you have to step back from rankings entirely, because that is clearly not the framework they were using. Nike operates on a different logic. They are not in the business of rewarding past performance. They are in the business of betting on future commercial value. And the case for Eala on that front is not subtle. Her press conference at the Australian Open this year pulled 171,000 views. Novak Djokovic's pulled 80,000. Sabalenka's pulled 9,000. That number keeps coming up because it refuses to be explained away. 9,000 views for the world number one's press conference at a Grand Slam. At the same event, a player ranked outside the top 30 pulled nearly 20 times that. Whatever is driving Eala's audience, it is not ranking points. What it is identity, cultural connection, the kind of loyalty that doesn't show up in a spreadsheet but shows up in real life as lines stretching unreasonably far outside tennis venues in Australia, in Dubai, and soon in Indian Wells. Former players have compared the traveling Filipino fan base to what Manny Pacquiao commanded at his peak, a comparison that only makes sense if you understand what Pacquiao meant to the Philippines at the height of his fame. He was not just an athlete, he was a national event. His fights didn't just attract viewers, they paused the country. Nike looked at Eala and saw a version of that energy attached to a 21-year-old tennis player with a rising ranking and a game that is genuinely improving. And they decided very quickly that this was not a moment to negotiate slowly, because they had already made this mistake once before. When Coco Gauff's profile was rising, Nike had the opportunity to lock her in as a flagship athlete, and they didn't move aggressively enough. Gauff went to New Balance. She then won the US Open, became one of the most commercially marketable athletes in women's sports, and New Balance built an entire identity around her. Nike watched that happen from the outside. The lesson was expensive and it was clear. When a generational talent with crossover cultural appeal becomes available, you don't wait to see what happens, you act. So when Eala's representation came to the table, Nike came with everything. The gallery, the custom shoes, the $45 million, the official title of brand ambassador for Southeast Asia, an entire marketing infrastructure built around her name and story. This was not a standard endorsement arrangement. This was a statement. Nike was not just signing an athlete. They were planting a flag in one of the fastest-growing sports consumption markets on the planet and putting Eala's face on that flag. Now let's talk about Sabalenka, because this is where the story becomes genuinely uncomfortable. Sabalenka is the world number one. She has won multiple Grand Slams. She is one of the most physically dominant players the women's game has produced in years. She plays with a ferocity and intensity that makes her matches some of the most watchable tennis on tour. By every traditional measure of athletic achievement, she is at the absolute top of the sport. And Nike told her no when she asked for a custom outfit. The same brand that built an entire gallery for a player ranked 31st, designed custom shoes with personal symbolism built in, and wrote a 9-figure check, told their world number one that custom treatment wasn't happening for her next season. Sabalenka confirmed it herself. She didn't hide the frustration. The acknowledgement was there in her own words, that next season wasn't going to be as special for her in terms of what Nike was providing. That's a remarkably restrained way to describe being publicly downgraded while simultaneously watching a younger athlete receive the royal treatment from the same brand. The contrast is not accidental. Nike is a company that makes very deliberate choices about who it elevates and how. When they design a gallery for one athlete and deny custom gear to another, they are sending a message. And the message is being heard loud and clear across the tennis world. So what happened to the relationship between Sabalenka and Nike? Because it wasn't always like this. The deterioration appears to have been gradual and driven by a series of incidents that individually might have been manageable but collectively pushed the partnership to a breaking point. The first visible crack came from Sabalenka's comments following Coco Gauff's win at Roland Garros. The remarks generated controversy and made headlines for the wrong reasons. Nike is a brand that guards its public image with an almost aggressive level of attention. They spend enormous resources building associations with values like inspiration, inclusion, and celebration of achievement. When one of their headline athletes generates negative press around another athlete's victory at a Grand Slam, that is exactly the kind of story Nike does not want attached to their brand. It was the beginning of a shift. Then came the US Open, where Sabalenka lost to Madison Keys in a result that surprised the tennis world. Losses happen in sport and are never themselves the issue. The issue is how they are handled, how they are talked about, and whether they generate the kind of aftermath that creates brand headaches. There were questions about the tone following that defeat. And then came the WTA Finals. The allegations surrounding Sabalenka's conduct after her loss to Aryna Sabalenka in the final are serious. Claims about how she behaved toward her opponent in the aftermath of that match, if accurate, represent exactly the category of controversy that global brands work hardest to distance themselves from. Nike's business model depends on athletes being aspirational figures. The moment an athlete becomes a liability rather than an asset in that sense, the commercial calculation changes completely. The reported tension that followed, Sabalenka reaching out to Nike to try and repair the relationship, Nike responding with silence or minimal engagement, suggests that the brand has already made its internal decision. The denial of the custom outfit wasn't a mistake or an oversight, it was a signal. And signing Eala at the same time as that signal was being sent made the message impossible to miss. This is how sports marketing works at the highest level. It is not sentimental. It is not loyal in the way fans are loyal. It follows influence, narrative, and commercial opportunity. Nike doesn't owe Sabalenka a custom dress because she has Grand Slam titles. They owe their shareholders returns. And right now, the athlete with the clearest path to delivering those returns in the markets they want to grow is not the world number one. It is a 21-year-old from Manila who sells out limited edition shoes in 60 seconds. About those shoes, because that detail deserves its own moment. When Nike quietly released a limited edition tied to Eala before the official ambassador announcement, the expectation was strong sales driven by her growing fan base. What actually happened exceeded what even optimistic projections suggested. The stock was gone in under 10 minutes. Checkout pages crashed. Fans from the Philippines and across Southeast Asia flooded the online stores with the kind of energy usually associated with high-end streetwear drops. The type of release where people are queuing virtually at midnight and refreshing browsers while also refreshing a second browser as a backup. Resellers immediately listed the shoes at 2 and 3 times the retail price. The sellout itself became the story. Screenshots of sold-out pages circulated on social media. The confirmation of purchase became something fans posted publicly as proof of participation in a moment. That is not what happens with a normal athlete's shoe release. That is what happens when a product becomes symbolic, when buying it means something beyond owning footwear. At the same time, images were circulating of Sabalenka's Nike signature shoes sitting on clearance racks in US and European retail outlets. 50% off, bright red stickers on the boxes, rows of them, quiet and unsold, while Eala's release was crashing servers. The visual contrast was sharp enough that people were putting those images side by side online and letting the comparison speak for itself. It is worth being fair here and noting that the clearance dynamic is partly a function of Nike's distribution strategy. For established global stars, they produce at scale, distributing widely across retail chains. Wide distribution creates availability, and availability reduces urgency. For limited drops tied to Eala, they used intentional scarcity to manufacture demand. Those are different marketing approaches producing predictably different outcomes. But fair or not, the optics landed the way they landed. And in sports marketing, optics are nearly everything. Sabalenka's supporters have argued, reasonably, that Nike has not done enough to build her personal brand into something that converts on-court dominance into commercial momentum. Where is the signature identity? Where is the lifestyle line that extends beyond performance gear? Where are the campaigns that tell her story in a way that reaches beyond existing tennis fans? The argument is that if Nike invested in her narrative the way they're now investing in Eala's, the commercial results would look different. That argument has merit. But Nike has clearly decided that the return on that investment elsewhere is higher right now. The Southeast Asian market is not a minor consideration for a brand operating at Nike's scale. The Philippines alone represents enormous commercial potential. Pair that with Indonesia, Vietnam, Thailand, and the wider regional audience that Eala's story speaks to, and you are looking at hundreds of millions of consumers in a region where sports fandom is passionate, digitally engaged, and increasingly connected to global brands. Eala is not just an athlete in that context, she is an access point, and Nike, having watched what they missed with Goff, was not going to stand at the edge of this opportunity and wonder what might happen. They bought in. For Eala, this is the kind of institutional support that can define a career, custom gear, a global campaign, the Nike infrastructure behind her story, the kind of visibility that accelerates everything else, broadcast attention, sponsorship interest, ranking pressure on opponents who know a match against her carries extra weight. This is not just a business deal, it is a platform. For Sabalenka, the situation is uncomfortable in a way that is difficult to dress up. She is the best player in the world by the rankings. She is not the player Nike is betting on. That gap between sporting achievement and commercial treatment is real, and it has been made public in the most visible way possible. What she does with that frustration, whether it becomes fuel on court or tension off it, will be worth watching. Because she is still the world #1, and the court is where that still matters most. Nike chose a 21-year-old over the world #1, and the tennis world hasn't recovered yet. Whether that's visionary or just ruthless sports business is honestly a conversation worth having. If you want more of this kind of breakdown, hit like and subscribe. There is a lot more of this story still to unfold, and we'll be covering all of it.